Hi, welcome everyone. We'll just give everyone 2 minutes to trickle in and then before we begin. I think we'll kick things off. So hello everyone, and welcome to today's LMA webinar on No More FOMO, LMA 2023 conference recap. For those who didn't get a chance to attend this year's session, this year's conference in person, this session is for you. And for those who did get a chance to attend but had to choose between 2 amazing speakers, this session is also for you. So don't worry, the struggle is now over. Our panelists have put together a session of key takeaways from this year's conference, LMA 2023 conference. I'm Carla Giacomo Donato, marketing specialist from Mountain Law, located in Vancouver, BC, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Before we begin, we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Lexpert, and as well as go over through a few housekeeping notes. Today's webinar is being recorded, and for those who have registered, you will be receiving a link to the recording. We will have a Q&A session at the end, so please feel free to drop any questions below at any time throughout the webinar, or leave a comment in the chat box as well. Before introducing our panelists, we'd like to share a quick conference overview. We had over 60 Canadian members attend the conference, and on top of that, we won the Race of the Regions Challenge, and we had our very own VIP reception on Monday night of the conference. Not only did we have a fantastic turnout, we had quite an esteemed group of speakers from the region present on various topics at the conference. We had Morgan McLeod from Cubicle Fugitive, who will also be the co-chair for next year's conference. Celine Gilmore from Davies, Peter Nguyen from the Discard Systems Group, Inc., Simone Hughes from Galley WLG, Michelle Bell from Miller Thompson, and Ryan Hillier from Novalex. And a special shout out to Ruth Marinis, who was this year's annual conference advisory committee. Now, to introduce today's panelists, our first speaker is Hans Chang, Business Development Director at Macmillan LLP and President of the LMA Chair. Hans oversees the National Business Development Team at Macmillan LLP and has been involved in the LMA for over a decade. He will be covering Fishbowl Peer Exchange, future state of law. Second, we have Kaylee Green, Marketing Business Development Manager at Vogler Ribbanoff LLP and Secretary for the LMA Canada Regional Board. She will be covering client service teams. We have Sarah Short, Business Development and Marketing Manager at McLennan Ross LLP and Comms Chair for the LMA Canada. She will be covering career development, a pre-conference session. And last but not least, we have Linda Fenton, Director of Business Development at Key Media. Key Media is a leading global publishing and events company specializing in B2B verticals. Linda oversees the Canadian legal portfolio consisting of Lexpert, Canadian Lawyer, Law Times, and Canadian Lawyer in-house. She will be covering General Counsel panel, How to Win Big at the Legal Marketing Game Show. So prior to today's session, we asked our panelists, in one word, what was your favorite thing about this year's conference? And their response, the energy, the people, connecting, and inclusion. It was not only nice to network with everyone, but we feel re-energized coming back to tackle what is on our desks. Everyone could learn something from newbies to seasoned members. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to our first speaker, Hans.
Thank you, Carla, and welcome everybody. Great to get a chance to cover some of the highlights from this conference. So one of the sessions this year, and I'm not sure if they've done these types of sessions in the past because it's been a while since I've attended one of these, but they did a fishbowl peer exchange, and it was really interesting because I think we all agree one of the things that we enjoy and benefit the most from attending some of these conferences is networking with peers, with colleagues in different firms across the US and Europe now and across Canada, seeing what they're doing. What are some of the things that are happening in their firms, and what can we take back from that? And that's exactly what this was. It was a discussion amongst everybody that was attending that session about what their feelings were on and what they've seen in terms of the market and the future of law as a business. The session itself was moderated by Timothy Karkaran from Karkaran Consulting Group, along with two participants, Beth Kizoni from Intap and Julie Gurney, who's the Director of Marketing and Client Development at Banesh. So what were some of the topics? Well, it really broadened out to five main topics, and the first of those five, as you can probably imagine, was on technology. That was a huge discussion, and it continues to be a discussion year over year on the importance of technology and what does it mean for law firms, and what are some of these things that law firms are leveraging. And the first part, of course, of that discussion with regards to technology, interestingly enough, was on the metaverse. And I don't know how much interaction and how much discussion there's been with your firms on the metaverse, but the discussion was around what does it mean for law firms? There's still not a lot of firms opening up shop in the metaverse, and we're seeing it as still early stages. But then there are firms like Arndt Fox Schiff who have opened up, and there's a few other firms that have opened up a presence in the metaverse. So what does that mean for the legal industry? Well, they would have opened up for a number of reasons, as we can imagine. One would be, setting them apart from the competition and promoting themselves as a tech-forward law firm, an innovative law firm, or it's just to try something new, trying to stay on top of new trends and technologies and make sure we stay on top of it, see where it leads. The challenge is that at the moment, the technology around serving clients, whether it's around actually delivery of legal services or intake of clients in a virtual reality setting, it's still not there. They're still developing. There's still a lot of discussion happening. A lot of technology is still developing around this area. And there's things like licensing IP and certain deals that could work in the metaverse, but the consensus was in that discussion, it's not the entire business. We're not at a point, or there doesn't seem to be viability for an entire law firm to completely go virtual and set up shop in the metaverse. But the idea really right now is that it's still very much in early stages, and some firms are testing the virtual waters, as it were. So a lot of discussion, a good discussion around the metaverse. The second part of the technology discussion was, of course, around tools, around artificial intelligence, around automation, all of these things that we have been discussing in our industry for years now, but I mean, how much do we hear about artificial intelligence these days, about ChatGPT? Of course, this is a hot topic that everybody has been discussing, and it wasn't limited to just AI, but the constant evolution of using data to inform and set strategies. And one of the points that was brought up is that our marketing department, the marketing and business development department, should be the ones learning, being on top of this technology, knowing how to marry the data, to dig the insights, and then provide the opportunity and analysis to our lawyers. So really, one of the key takeaways from that is that, no matter what form of technology it is, that technology is here to stay. We're seeing a lot of law firms across North America, global firms that are opening up innovation hubs, innovation teams, just to dedicate resources on technology, about what's new, and how we can leverage that to better stay competitive in the market. And one of the other points that was brought out was roles like marketing ops, data scientists, project managers, marketing technologists, and research and innovation. These were all roles that we will continue to see grow in the future. So a big discussion around technology. The second point of the discussion was surrounding virtual versus in person, and I'm sure this is a topic that we've been talking about for months, if not years now, is coming back to in person. What are firms across Canada and the US? What are they doing? How is that working out? Well, one interesting point that was brought up is that there are general counsel out there that have flagged a concern with associates not coming into the office regularly, not coming into the firm for training. They've gone so far as to select firms. They have a policy set where they are selecting firms where there is policies in place for associates being back in the office at least part of the time, because they feel it's that important to their training and the quality of the work that they receive, the service that they receive as a client. So that was a very interesting takeaway from that discussion on being in person. And also the discussion around how does in-person attendance, how does being in the office affect the culture of the firm? Well, there's a balance that's been mentioned. The culture piece really is it's the non-work piece, right? It's when you're in the office and when you're going out for coffee or for lunches with your colleagues, it's having those discussions that are perhaps a little bit off topic, but then you come back energized, you come building that relationship, and you become a stronger team for it. And really the consensus there is that that culture and those relationships are still forged in person. So there's definitely a change in that we now have a very effective use of using virtual environments in carrying out our tasks. But then the question still remains, how do we develop the culture of the law firm? And that kind of tied into a brief discussion about firms pursuing aggressive growth, which is kind of the third topic. And aggressive growth, one of the points that was mentioned quickly was that coming out of COVID, for those law firms out there who are pursuing very aggressive growth, that there are some factors to contribute to perhaps law firms that may fail and law firms that grow too quickly. That this market will be less forgiving. That the firms that built their culture on people will succeed in this market, as opposed to firms that are looking at the bottom line. They're looking at growing headcount for revenue generation, for revenue increase. Those are the firms that will face challenges in the future. Another brief point that was brought up, and this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. The fourth point was on law firm sales professionals, so client-facing business development and sales roles. One interesting statistic that was mentioned by Beth from Intap was that we're looking at sales roles in law firms have grown from 7 to 200 people in the past 5 years. That's still not a lot of people if you consider how many marketing professionals are across North America and around the world. But whether it's slow, whether it's fast, whether it's dramatic, it will continue to grow. But there's still roadblocks out there that makes it a challenge for these sales roles to grow. But it is out there, and that growth is happening. The final part was, I think, something that came out a number of years ago, and it's on non-lawyer ownership of law firms. Arizona has gone towards that model. We've seen that model in Australia. We've seen that model in the UK. And the consensus is that this type of non-lawyer ownership of law firms is going to grow. We will see more and more of it in the United States. We'll see private equity firms, we'll see venture capital come in and invest in law firms. And those sophisticated business professionals will impact operational excellence of law firms, which will impact other law firms, how they position themselves, how they organize for operational excellence and competitive excellence as well. So those were kind of the five interesting takeaways that I had for the future of law in this industry that we're working in. So thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Kaylee, who will be talking about the client teams.
Hi, everyone. So during the conference, I attended a few sessions around client teams, essentially how to grow and measure success of them. I think this was a popular topic at the conference because we see a lot of discussion in the industry today around collaboration, whether it's collaboration within our firms or collaboration with our clients. And for those of us that have instituted key client programs and client service teams, it was a great way to hear about best practices in using these programs to deliver value, efficiencies, and ultimately to gain a competitive advantage. As everyone on this call would know, client teams are essentially a form of account management. Many of the panelists spoke about the benefits of implementing these sort of structured programs. One of the things they repeated, which I really sort of thought was an interesting kind of saying, was that it increased the stickiness of their clients. And that's definitely something I'm going to use talking internally, because when they had these structured programs in place, they saw, greater client retention. We all know it's easier to get more work from existing clients than new clients. There was improved cross-selling. More practices were serving one client, and it helped in their pitch process, and ultimately helped in revenue generation and the relationship they had with these clients. And for the clients, those firms that had these very strategic and well thought out programs, it demonstrated to them the value that the firm showed towards the client, and that they always had the client's best interest in mind. So a lot of the sessions, were really informative for those firms that didn't have a program in place. And they told us sort of what data and what competitive intelligence you need to do, if you're going to go down this path. What do you need to have sort of put in place before you decide to establish a client team? And the main thing that stood out was essentially, and this is obvious, review your client list. You need to identify the clients that have the most potential. And in order to do that, it's not just looking at the list. You really do have to ask some difficult questions internally. You need to review the revenue potential. For those individuals with large firms, make friends with your pricing team. Look at profitability. Look at year-over-year spend. And then what clients on that list can we serve holistically? What practice areas are there the opportunities to introduce to them, to grow with them? They talked about long-term strategy. Does the client have work that we want to do? What industry trends, regulatory trends are on the horizon, and what are the client's operational long-term goals? And equally important, this is all about collaboration. Is the client a good fit? What is their willingness to participate in a key client program? And so you have to have those discussions not only internally, but with the client, and identify sort of those shared goals. Look at the strength of the existing relationship, and do their values align with those of your firms? And this is really important. There was a lot of discussion around diversity throughout all the programs I attended, but it really was at the forefront in a lot of these client teams on how we structure them, what the client is asking from us on these teams. And finally, what is marketing and BD's role in sort of helping this process succeed? What efficiencies are we responsible? Do we have to make sure that are in place to make sure that the account management program is a success? So, so ultimately the program is client-centric, and we need to make sure that the firm has the right resources in place and the right strengths in place, whether that is specific practice areas, that there is bench within those practice areas. And so depending on the size of your firm could have 2 client teams, or if you are sort of a global behemoth, you could have hundreds of teams. It was really interesting in all these sessions when the panels would, sort of call out to the audience and see who has client teams in place. Is it greater than 10? Is it less than 5? And it was it spread across the board. There wasn't it wasn't something all firms were putting in place. And so that's sort of interesting to see. The ones that were doing it tended to sort of be the larger ones, or the smaller ones that had such a clear focus they could identify who those key clients were within their industry. So it was really interesting to see, sort of just from the audience participation, what people are doing in their firms. So the overall LMA conference theme was essentially around how we can amplify our roles within our own firm. And so for those of you in BD roles at your firm, how can you take this information and, sort of amplify your role internally? So a lot of the takeaways, these are sort of the key ones that stood out for me. So firstly, understand which of your clients are poised for growth. And, you're essentially doing a SWOT around each of those clients, who their competitors are, what their strategic focus is, and how they can complement what your firm has to offer. Secondly, evaluate and measure which clients are returning the best margins. Dig into your financials. And finally, measure, review, and establish KPIs and processes around touch points and, again, financials. This was heavily emphasized. Look at revenue, look at WIP, look at the number of new matters that are open, look at the number of your win percentages on pitches. And then also the number of engaged timekeepers. And if you are a sort of a national firm, the geography of those timekeepers where you're servicing the client. So to sum up, this probably is all very straightforward and things that we know that have to be put in place in order to have a successful account management program. But the panelists, they were very candid and said it's not as easy as it sounds, because we all know that law is a different beast. So what sounds like sort of a straightforward process doesn't always run that smoothly. For example, many of the panelists talked about internal challenges setting up this client teams program. From some had cultures that historically lawyers were in silos or possessive of over clients, and others talked about prioritizing origination fees over growing revenue. And so these are sort of issues that's why you have to have these sort of strong conversations internally and ask these questions. And they talked about how, in order for initiative to be successful, you need to build internal support, and that doesn't always just mean the managing partner. So, for any of these projects to be successful, a lot of the panelists said time and time again, pilot it, start small, build those internal champions to get the project moving forward. And as you go, sort of tweak issues that might pop up so that when you do launch it sort of across the board, you have already defined your goals. You've addressed what resources you need. You've established sort of all the KPIs, and you've sort of formalized not only the internal team structure on the lawyer side, but anyone in marketing and business development, their roles and the roles they will play on a client team. So that is pretty much 2 sessions in 30 seconds. So I will pass this over to Sarah, who is going to talk about another theme at the conference, which was around career growth.
Thanks, Kaylee. I'm going to attempt to put a full day of content into 30 seconds. But I attended the pre-conference on career development, and it was a new pre-conference for LMA. There were multiple other sessions throughout the conference focusing on career growth and career development. So it was absolutely a theme of this year's conference, with amplify your impact, amplify your career, and amplify your development and growth. During the pre-conference session, there was the discussion of career growth, not only from your perspective as you wanting to grow your career, but also from how you as a specialist or a manager or director can help the career growth of those who report to you. So it was very much a personal career growth, and then helping of others as well. And we discussed the difficult questions of asking, is there an opportunity for me to advance in my role? Is there an opportunity for me to do something a bit different from what I'm currently doing to help me with that career path and career development? Similarly, is there anything that you're doing that someone reports to you is interested in doing or wanting to learn, or are you potentially blocking someone from doing something to help advance their career? There was a huge focus on the 360-degree feedback that can help with your career development, but of course with the career development of those who report to you as well. One thing that was also discussed during the career development pre-con was branding. And as legal marketers, business development individuals, we often focus on strategic planning for our law firm or practice groups or lawyers, or branding a practice group or branding the firm. And all of those aspects are things we should focus on ourselves as well, branding ourselves and strategic planning for ourselves. The pre-con actually provided the opportunity to create your own strategic plan for yourself, to come up with quarterly goals, to make sure that you're getting yourself to a point where you can lay out your plan and your timeline for that career development and career growth. And when they discussed the branding of yourself personally, there were different values that you could come up with, from personal attributes to business attributes to skill attributes. Personal being, are you resourceful? Are you authentic? Are you creative? The business attributes being, maybe you have great communication skills, you're a professional, you're a strategic thinker, or your skills are that you have former industry experience or branding experience, or you're experienced in digital marketing, or you're experienced in client teams like Keely just spoke about. So thinking about those aspects when you brand yourself, instead of saying, I'm an event coordinator at insert law firm name here, you sell yourself as what you do as opposed to your title. So saying, I help lawyers execute unique and strategically thought out events to grow business, maintain business, and gain new clients, makes far bigger of an impact than I'm an event coordinator at whatever law firm you work at. And so think about that when you're speaking to others within your firm and outside your firm. I know quite often we get in a system of being part of the marketing team, and in some instances, depending on your firm size and depending on the relationships you have, maybe the lawyers at your firm have no idea what you do. You're marketing, so you do everything, and that can be a catch-all in some instances. So having those conversations where you describe what you do really helps you to brand yourself and position yourself within your firm and externally as well for others who you meet. Talk about your story. Everyone has a unique story of how you came to be a legal marketer and work in legal marketing. There were multiple individuals who were at the pre-con session who they were lawyers and decided to transition into legal marketing, or they came completely from outside of law and transitioned into legal marketing. So that can also help you with those skill attributes as well. You may have something you bring to the table that's completely unique and different, and helps you with those soft skills in becoming the individual and becoming the person you want to be now and in the future. Another discussion during the pre-con was navigating landmines within your firm. Is there an opportunity for you to grow? Is someone keeping you from growing? Is, are you at a point where there's nowhere for you to go within that firm, so should you potentially move to a different firm? And have those conversations and have those open and honest conversations internally. Really, at the end of the day, any good business is going to want you to flourish, whether it's there or somewhere else. And obviously, people don't want to lose people, but you have to look out for you first. And think about if there's any negativity when you're building that internal network. Building your internal network means not only with marketing professionals, but also with the IT department. You could build it with the accounting department, human resources, and having those allies on your side, those who are, maybe you have a marketing partner within your firm or a BD partner within your firm who can really be someone you lean on to help you grow and advance, and neutralize the negativity. Just get rid of all that negativity when you're trying to advance your career and help advance the career of others as well. When you speak about what you do as well, and when people ask, oh, what's marketing been up to, or what have you been doing, instead of saying, oh, we're busy, which I'm guilty of saying that all the time, talk about what you're doing and how you're adding value within the firm. If you're, we just worked on this exceptional proposal that if we win it and we think we'll be successful, we'll gain X percentage of dollars, or we'll grow one of our client service teams. And that will help you with branding yourself and positioning yourself as just being another busy individual versus how you add value to the firm and how you bring back to the firm's bottom line as well. Incorporate self-assessments. I know we all have reviews that we go through on a regular basis, but doing a self-assessment to see if I've built my strategic plan on myself, how am I doing? Am I achieving my goals? Am I advancing? Do I have the potential to grow? And how is that impacting me overall? At the end of the session, there was a really interesting quote that I'll read because it was on the very last slide, which really summed everything up. You own your own career. You know your value and your worth, and be open to opportunities. It could be an opportunity that brings you elsewhere. It could be an opportunity that brings you into a completely different field. But at the end of the day, this is about your career and your career growth. And focusing on yourself is the best thing you can do for yourself and for everyone around you. So with that, I will pass it over to Linda, who's going to talk about the GC panel.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, so very thankful to be involved in this webinar. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm covering the GC Council panel, which is how to win big at the legal marketing game show. This is one of the most engaging panel discussions that I have ever had the pleasure of attending. It was so much fun. Right out of the gate, Jennifer Dezos, who is the Director of Client Services at Thomson Reuters, who was moderator, she had the panelists come out and do 2 truths and a lie. So all of the discussions were centered around like very specific questions, and it was so much fun. There was a twist on the classic and more appropriately named keep doing, fixed, or strike. So this is kind of a summary of some of those questions and very specific topics. So the first one was their thoughts on law firm news and alerts. Law firm news, alerts, and emails. For the keep and the fix answers, it was like staying on top of legal news, and most firms are knowledgeable, but the delivery is what's most important. Having a partner call to tell you, read this, it shows the curiosity that you want to be engaged in their business. The strike was, answer and update your form of communication. Try text messages. That could be a more effective way to reach that potential GC. Next would be spending time with your lawyer or at your favorite sports game or restaurant. The panelists, they were all kind of varied. There was one of each. Keep the dinner part, but clients are individual, have those unique preferences. Fix it by customizing them. Strike out the dinners and sports games, go visit them at their location to see their business. One point that really struck out to me, which was Arash, he said that no one actually congratulated him on Persian New Year. So that's something that can really open up that discussion among your peers to, see how you can really touch and influence those particular GCs. Client feedback interviews. This was an interesting one because nobody had a very strong opinion one way or the other. Keep fixing and striking, yet when rephrased, firms were all willing to participate in the feedback so they can improve. Go to specific clients who don't typically give feedback directly so that things can be corrected. The question of the billable hour, all 3 are for it. You keep it. It's not specific to the billable hour. It's more about how it's applied. That discussion around, having 10 associates work on the same matter. If it's valuable, you should be billed for your time and your expertise. That's what they're looking for, and they're happy to pay for it. Some of the tactical ways to understand their business, RFPs came up where templates that are used, they are fundamentally a mistake. Before submitting to an RFP, go to the facility, get the DNA of what you're working with, show that you care and are really willing to submit and help their organization. Ask questions, speak to someone other than the GCs, talk to the CFOs, the CEOs. That's the way you can really understand it's more than just a fraction of the issues that you can help. Similar to some of the other panel discussions, law firms and their use of technology, that's definitely at the forefront of some of these conversations. It opened up the discussion because all three said fix. Firms tended to be behind on cybersecurity. Share how you're protecting those documents and email sharing. Be on the leading edge by asking specific questions. Obtain the best technology for your firm. Technology companies are really good at knowing their customers, and law firms should do the same. Technology needs to provide a value, and firms should make client lives easier and more efficient. We then filtered into the lightning round, which was a match game, and they were filling in the blanks. It was a lot of fun. So a lot of conversation happened after they filled in those blanks. Continued on the topic of technology was app creation. If they could create an app, what would it do? And essentially it would be to make their lives better. Communication is the key. They touched on D&I, and for firms, they need to improve. They're often misguided and have a long way to go. ChatGPT, embrace the change that is coming with AI. Encourage the use to make your lives easier, but make sure that you're treading cautiously for that quality control. And then how many lawyers you work with? That was a very interesting question to me because it was only 3 to 4 at a firm. So while they're open to meeting more, to have a touch point, say at each office, one of the key takeaways for this was don't offer every area. Specialize in a certain area so that you are really good in that area. You want to be the specialist. Some of the closing notes that summarized this discussion nicely was lawyers need to understand that it's a business. Fundamentally, it is you, as in the BD and marketing teams, are creating the key differentiators, which are the competitive advantage of law firms moving forward. You have to encourage lawyers on how they can help their clients and proactively reaching out to and learn about their business so you can make their in-house lives easier. And care about their business and be curious. Again, this was an incredible panel, and I think it was really like nuggets of information that could really open up the discussion at your firm. Awesome. That's my summary on that one. We can open up to the team if we wanted to have a discussion. I know there was some overlap. I mean, Hans, you were talking about ChatGPT in your sessions, and Kaylee, with the team and the client retention. So there's quite a bit of topics that were covered throughout many different themes throughout the conference itself.
Yeah, and feel free. I think Carla was going to mention this as well, but feel free if you do have any questions to type it in the chat, and we're happy to answer some of those questions. But one of the things that I wanted to kind of supplement that discussion, I think all of us, all of the panelists agree that the GC session was one of the best that we've seen. It was really well executed, the way that they've done it in kind of like a game show type of format, and covered so many topics in a short period of time. But some of the takeaways for me from that GC panel for sure was one, all 3 GCs were specifically saying, don't let the lawyers conduct the interview. Have business people, have everybody in this room, have the non-lawyers conduct the interview. It should be from a client service perspective, not from a legal service provider. So that was, again, these are themes that we've probably heard in times past, but this is coming directly from the client, is that they'd like to speak to somebody who's really focused on client service, and that is at the core of what they do, as opposed to that legal service provider. The other other part that I thought was really interesting was, again, on sporting events. Linda mentioned it was really interesting to me because I think all three of them said, we don't need to go to sporting events. Like, we don't need to spend that much time with our lawyers. Don't worry about it. Sure, I do want to spend some time, whether it's visiting my firm or going out for dinner. That's fine, but I don't need to go to a 3-4 hour sporting game with you. So that was an interesting takeaway as well, because I'm sure with all of our departments, that's a constant feature. And do we include that, especially with rising cost of hockey tickets, and I'm sure in Toronto you have Raptors. All of those tickets are definitely going up in price. So sorry, before I'm sure my other panelists have other things to add, but Carla, I just wanted to mention as well, is the chat feature enabled for our participants?
Yes, the chat is enabled, so our participants can, as I mentioned before, you can put any comments in the chat. Feel free to drop, again, any questions in the Q&A box. As hopefully questions trickle in, maybe I'll ask one question just to open up a little bit of discussion. For our panelists, was there any other sessions besides the ones discussed that resonated most with you, or any other takeaways from, besides, again, any other sessions throughout the conference that also might have spoken to you?
So I'll jump in there. One of the sessions that I attended was on sort of the art of storytelling. And, it was really interesting because they talked about, essentially, we all know how much content we produce and how to make sure that that content is actually purposeful, that there is that it is relevant to the clients and we're not just adding to the noise. And so it was a really good session. It brought in both sort of the tactical sort of things firms can do for those people in comms roles on sort of reworking the content you receive from your lawyers. But it also talked about sort of tips that we can take back to our lawyers on sort of that art of storytelling, how you want to frame the legal issue in a business context, and, things that we always tell our clients, like, don't bury the lead. It's always, start with that, because that is what's going to open the email, and that in keeping that sort of that hook in the subject line in the email signature, so that people will open those emails. That was a really interesting sort of session. Again, things that we all think about, but one thing I like about the conference is that you hear things that you that remind you of things that you should go back and be that resource to your clients on things, whether it is more strategic from a sort of client team standpoint, or more practical and tactical, like, can we fix the subject line so that people will open this? So this is sort of one of the things I like about the conference, is just sort of the variety of content that is shared, that is often just a good reminder for us all in sort of best practices.
The other session that I thought was really interesting, I don't know if the other panelists had a chance to attend the Rainmaker Genome Project. It was a study that they've done on what makes what are the traits that makes lawyers successful in their business development, like who are the rainmakers, and what type of lawyers or rainmakers are the type of people that perform are the highest performers in a law firm in terms of perhaps revenue generation. And it talked about 5 different profiles. One was the expert. So these are the speakers, thought leaders, people that are really writing thought leaderships, looking for situations to demonstrate that expertise. The second was the confidant, who have a very deep and personal relationship with a core group of clients, usually oriented towards the C-suite. The third was the activator, and so they have a robust network. So they cast a wide net, a robust network in several areas, and opens doors and activates that networks for other people in the firm and in their network. The fourth was a debater, so somebody who's really focused on innovation and unique point of view. So not necessarily in a negative context, but somebody who kind of doesn't necessarily take the status quo for what it is, but challenges and looks for ways to improve. And then the realist who looks to earn trust through honesty and transparency in dealing with their clients, and somebody who's very protective of their internal team and comfortable with telling the teams no. And so the study talked about, out of these kind of 5 different profiles, who are the ones that have, or what are the profiles that has the highest performers in the firm, and which ones have the highest low performing low performers in a firm. And it was really interesting because I think for a lot of us, we see a lot of the confidence, we see a lot of the experts, the speakers, the thought leadership, or the deep relationship with a single key client or a couple of clients. But it was actually the activator, so that person that casts a wide net, who, when they surveyed, it was 31.9% of activators were high performers at law firms, and only 12.5% were the low performers. And then in contrast, the profiles with the highest number of low performers was the confidant, with 26.8% of them being in the low performer category, as opposed to 19.2% in the high category. So it was a very interesting discussion. It was a very interesting findings on what are the traits that actually make our rainmakers or our lawyers successful in generating revenue.
I attended a couple of the DEI sessions that were provided by LMA for this conference, and it was really interesting because it's something that we've seen and was actually discussed at the LMA Canada conference we hosted in November, particularly with RFPs and how you build your client teams. And one of the themes that came through was around putting people on your RFP or putting people forward as a client team to show the breadth of diversity you have, but then those individuals not actually being the ones to do the work. And one of the sessions I attended was very interesting because they had some of the speakers talk about instances where the lawyers knew their team wasn't diverse enough and they had to provide reports because some companies require reports. And they said, well, can't we just fudge the numbers so that, because we have diversity, just maybe not on this team? And more with in-house counsel, they have different diversity platforms where you can't actually fudge the numbers on who on your team is diverse and who's providing the legal services. So it was far better to acknowledge that we don't have a diverse team, but we're working toward fixing it, rather than trying to fudge numbers or make it appear that you have a diverse team when you actually don't. And just having those open and honest conversations with people about why do we not have diverse individuals on our team? What is blocking us from doing this? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a branding thing? Do we have to fix how we're doing, how we're marketing and attracting lawyers and attracting talent? And also to make sure that you're not looking at just your lawyers when it comes to those who are diverse individuals or part of minorities on your team. Having paralegals and having support staff, thinking about diversity overall, not just from a lawyer perspective, but from a firm perspective as a whole, was something that was discussed during a couple of the panels that I attended.
We do have one question that came in. So can you comment, from Ruth, can you comment on how the connections you made at the LMA 2023 with other legal marketers can assist and support you in your legal marketing practice?
I find connections from my perspective with other legal marketers helps to have people to even discuss and bounce ideas off of. I know even through LMA Canada and through the board, and even going to the conference as well, we often have discussions where we're all working toward the same thing, or something's coming up that may affect one of us in a different firm, and having the ability to discuss those issues and discuss the potential for how it could affect you, or be someone to provide a sounding board for someone else, has been exceptional in the legal marketing practice, and also having the great opportunity with LMA to attend the different sessions and learn from other legal marketers and others who are experienced in various areas that, you know, I may touch on, but I don't have a full understanding of a specific area of legal marketing. ChatGPT is completely outside of my wheelhouse right now, and I'm sure it's something that 5-10 years from now it'll be standard for everyone, but learning from industry experts is exceptional as well.
I would say one of the benefits of sort of, growing my network is that I often find that we have blinders on within our own firm, within the Canadian legal industry. It's relatively quite small, and we can say, we can all talk about what all the other Canadian firms are doing and that sort of thing. And so establishing those connections with our counterparts at US firms, especially some of the very big ones, it's great because, by default, you've connected with them on LinkedIn, you're following their firms, you see how other firms approach sometimes similar business issues, or often you see new novel ideas on how they're servicing their clients. And it just allows us to sometimes remove the current blinders we have on. And, that in itself is a great resource, having a network like that.
Yeah, and I would say I think validation is a huge part. Making those connections, talking about the pain points is one part. But the fact that you're not, there's other colleagues and friends across the world that are in the same predicament of facing those same pain points and challenges. It's validation that you're not doing anything wrong. This is the challenge that all of us face. But in another way, validation in that when we see, like Kaylee mentioned, when we see other people at other firms doing certain things, it comes back with ammo for us because, there was that point that was made, and I think we all agree. Lawyers love to be the innovators. Lawyers also want to be the one that's on the cutting edge, as long as they're not the ones that did it first, and as long as there's a use case that's already been proven successful first. And that comes back with ammo for us when we come back to our firms to say, look, these are the firms that I've spoken to that are already implementing this, that are already doing this, and they found success in it. And that helps us to initiate, that helps to drive forward the projects with our leadership to continue to tackle those things and make progress in them.
I agree. The opportunity to be in person, first of all, because we all come from various different provinces and locations throughout the globe, to meet up and see each other in person really helps to build those relationships and reestablish those connections where we're all in a room and we can all have those conversations and open that dialogue of, you're not doing anything wrong, or yeah, I'm facing this challenge too, because sometimes you're a little hesitant to pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, I'm having this challenge. But if you're in that room together and the conversation is naturally flowing, or you both visited, the same session and want to talk about diversity and inclusion or ESG or, whatever the conversation is, you can just have it right then and there. And, moving on to reestablish those connections, I think was really great part of the LMA 23.
Great. Does anyone have any additional questions for our panelists? None. Panelists, are there any other additional comments you'd like to share with our audience? So I think then we'll start wrapping this up. So we have a few announcements before we end and send everyone off on their way. So I'd like to announce the next session will be on digital marketing fundamentals, the good, the bad, and the practical, on May 31st. So stay tuned for that announcement. And as well, we'd like to announce summer social events will be underway in various regions. We have the LMA Toronto Summer Social that we'd like to announce will be on Thursday, June 22nd, the location and details to come. We are also planning the Vancouver Summer Social, so date and location to come as well. And before we end, I'd like to thank again our panelists for an amazing session. like to thank our sponsor and like to thank everybody who has joined our webinar today. We wish everybody, oops, I believe we have one more. Like to thank everyone a great day. And yeah, thank you so much for attending. Bye, everyone.